Earth Science video time again. All right, this is Norris Teaches Science, another Earth Science video um, coming out. Today, I, Mr. Norris, will present to you oceans. Past couple for the few videos, the last one and a couple more, we're going to be talking about water in the hydrosphere. So the oceans are part of the hydrosphere. So your goal for this video is to say that you can describe how oceans fit into the environmental processes in the hydrosphere. So what are oceans? Well, they are large bodies of salt water. I didn't know I had to define that, but I do. Salt water, not freshwater, salt water. And if you didn't know, there are four oceans in the world: the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Indian, and the Arctic. Do you guys know what ocean you live closest to? If you live in the same state I do, which is North Carolina, then you live closest to the Atlantic Ocean. I've only seen the Atlantic Ocean. I have not seen any of the other oceans, even though I would love to see them. Now, salt water, let's talk a little bit about that. That means it has high salinity, or salinity means the amount of dissolved salt in the ocean. And we usually express it as in parts per thousand. Now, the source of salt water is either chemical weathering that has run into the water, erosion that's went into the water, or even volcanic activities can sometimes create salt water. If you look over here in this picture, this looks like there's a whole bunch of sand down here right below this swimmer. That actually is they're in salt water, but that's even saltier or high salinity salt water because um, salt water is more dense than fresh water, so it's going to sink. So factors that affect salinity, precipitation. If it rains, you're going to have a lower salinity of the water. Evaporation, you're going to have high salinity of water because you're taking water away, leaving the salt there. Freezing can create high salinity of water because you're taking water away, leaving the salt behind. And melting will lower salinity because you're adding water and you're diluting the salt in there. So just just so you know, precipitation and melting lower it, evaporation and freezing increases it, the amount of salt in the water. Now, the density of seawater, I kind of alluded to it. The salinity effect, high salinity water is deep in the water column because it is more dense. The more salt in the water, the more dense the water. The less salt, the less dense, so it's going to float towards the top. Temperature will also affect. So high temperature water is near the surface while cold is at the bottom because cold water is more dense than warm water. So cold water will sink, warm water will float. When we also talk about oceans, we have to talk about waves. And what a wave is actually a movement of energy through water. It is not the movement of water, it is the movement of energy. If you were in the middle of the ocean and waves were coming by, there was no current or anything, you would just go up and down, because energy moves in the water, not the water. Movement of water is something else. You can see some waves over here on, in the GIF. Now, waves are caused by wind blowing over the water's surface, and the stronger the wind, the higher the waves. Now, the reason why some waves curl, like you see at the ocean, is because they're starting to interact with the bottom of the ocean, and it's creating this point where you're going to reach where the wave can't get any bigger, and gravity just makes it topple over. We also have something called upwelling that happens in the ocean. This is the upward movement of cold water from ocean depths. It just comes up. And usually, when it does this, it brings up tiny organisms, it brings up some minerals, it brings up nutrients that fish will feed on, so it creates more fish in the area. But it's cold water coming up from the ocean depths. Ocean currents. An ocean current is a massive ocean water that flows from one place to another place. And there's many different ocean currents out there. Um, for me, the closest ocean current to where I live is the Gulf Stream. So there are two types of ocean currents. You can either have warm currents or cold currents. So warm currents mean warm water. And so these usually start at the tropics and they move towards the poles. So an example would be the Gulf Stream. Uh, I live on the east coast of the United States, so we have the Gulf Stream, and that Gulf Stream is also something that can cause hurricanes to become stronger because of the warm water. Cold currents have cold water, and they start at the poles and move towards the tropics. So an example would be the Canary Current. Canary Current is off the west coast of Europe. So the Gulf Stream and the Canary Current are also sister currents. So here over here you have, I'm highlighting it. This is the Gulf Stream, and the Canary Current is over here. So why do currents move? Well, there's primary and secondary forces. The primary force is what starts it, and it's usually the solar heating, the winds, gravity, and Coriolis effect. And secondary forces will influence where the current flows, and there could be multiple different secondary forces out there that can cause currents to go a certain place. So one thing about currents, though, is that they can influence the climate. If you don't know what the climate is the average of an area with weather. It does factor into the weather an area will have too. So there's an exchange of heat in the water with the atmosphere when you mess with currents. So the type of current nearby does influence the weather of an area. So if you have a warm current nearby, you're going to have more warm temperatures. So I live on the east coast of the United States. I live in North Carolina. Because of this warm current, it's really difficult for us to get snow in the area where I live. I don't live in the mountain area. I don't live at the coast either. I live in central North Carolina. And so we don't get snow that often because the water still influences our atmosphere above North Carolina. But cold currents do bring colder temperatures. You can see that in Europe, in London. They also get more rain, and it's cloudy sometimes over in Europe and London because of the Canary Current or the cold current off its coast. But this is a little bit about oceans. I really hope you learned some stuff. We are going to talk more about water and different things in the next coming videos. Hope you learned something. I'm Mr. Norris, and I'm out for this video.